Okay, thank you. So, hello once again. Now we came to this part where we will present our guest from Serbia, from Belgrade, Višnja Begović. Višnja, very welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm very happy to have Višnja here because at the time that the program was already made, I had a suggestion to call her as a special guest to Đakovo because at that time I read her amazing book, Jet Lag, and I thought that she would definitely fit here, and I'm even more sure now. So just to say, this talk will not be super long, and we will not go to like analytical approach or anything because we don't have so much time, but the main idea is to present our guest, to hear some of her poems, and also to hear a bit about her big other life far away from here in the USA, where she spent 7 years. So this book was published by Enklava in Serbia 2 years ago, so it's not super fresh, but we never had a promotion here in this part of Croatia, so it's...
Or in Croatia at all, actually.
At all.
Yeah, so I'm very excited.
Great. So let's start from just the fact how you end up in the USA. What were you studying? What did you do there? Can you tell us a bit of the...
Sure. I moved to the US when I was 19 to study singing. I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. So I lived there for 4 years, and then after I graduated, I moved to New York. I lived there for 3 years. I did my master's there, and I traveled around America for quite a bit. And then I decided to come back to Serbia because I kind of was tired of being so far away from my family and friends. That was mostly my reason. I always say if New York was in Europe, I'd probably still live there because it's my favorite city ever, but it's also a very harsh place to live, and I think America in general is quite harsh. So I mean, a lot of my book has to do about that, I guess. But yeah, that's how I ended up there. And so yeah, that's seven years, most of my 20s.
Seems that you went out at the right moment.
Yeah, I think so. Though honestly, I was telling Mihailo today, I moved to America and Obama was still president. And then Trump's first mandate happened when I was living there my second year. And then again, Biden, and now again, Trump. So here we are.
Yeah, there is a whole circle.
Yeah.
So in all this career that you have, like being in Berklee, singing, and then you had a different master, right?
Mm-hmm. In arts administration.
Yeah, and I guess that in between you also worked there. Where did the poetry came in? Did you like always feel the need to write, or did it came maybe after you left your country? How was that?
Honestly, I always was writing because my family is in publishing. They're all in the literary world, so it's very close to me, but I didn't really understand that as something that's, you know, a job or anything. It was just kind of like my outlet, I guess. And I was really focused on singing and acting and all of that. But I actually, when I started college, my idea was to be a lyricist and to like actually study songwriting and like specialize in lyric writing. But I was too young and I wasn't brave enough kind of to do that because there was a lot of pressure, and I decided, okay, I'll do performance because that seemed more reasonable, I guess, at the time, which now I'm like, there was not, but okay. But anyway, so that's how, it was always kind of there. And then at the end of college, I did an elective in poetry for a year with a fantastic professor who was so passionate about literature and poetry, specifically American poetry, and just the way he spoke about, you know, the way he analyzed poems, the way he spoke about the different letters you use and how you create sounds with. I remember this particular lesson when we were doing I think a Robert Frost poem called Birches, and he was analyzing how he uses the letter S and C throughout the poem to create the like cracking sound of branches. And to me that was like, it blew my mind because I never thought about, even though I was so close to literature, I never thought about it like, oh wow, that's so serious, you know, like it's so actually imaginative and so many things you can do. And I think he was the one who inspired me, and then I started writing more and more, because I won't go into the details of it, but I kind of went away from singing while I was studying it. So I was more backstage, and I was a sound technician, and I was working as a stage manager and all different kinds of things. So this was a great outlet for me, and when I felt that passion, I realized, oh, this is the passion I was missing with singing. Like, this is actually it. When I write poetry, I feel how I always wanted to feel when I sing. So it was actually the right thing for me.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can just like learn the new layers of the thing when you go slowly. But what caught my attention now was she said, I was not brave enough, but at the same time she left being 19 from Croatia to the US to study, and it's just incredible. Also, so you started writing while you were in the USA.
Yes.
And did you start writing in your mother tongue, or you like simultaneously tried in English already?
I was doing both. I think I was writing more in English at the time, because I was just speaking English all the time, and it was more, I guess all the people that I lived with were American. I didn't have very many Balkan friends, so I was kind of just assimilated into the language. But then when I took this elective that I spoke of, I was reading a book, I think it was Ognjenka Lakićević, a Serbian poet, and I was reading her book, and then I wrote for an exam for the poetry elective. I wrote a poem in English, and I said to my professor, like, oh, I think I really achieved the rhythm of Serbian. Like, I don't know what I did, but I think it sounds like Serbian to me, even though it's English. So he asked me to read, and we analyzed it a bit, and he explained to me that it's because I was using a lot of multi-syllable words, which is not very common. English uses mostly one or two syllables in their words. So that was super interesting. Again, saying what I was saying before, it again blew my mind. So then I realized, oh, actually I kind of enjoy writing in Serbian way more, which is not, it's kind of reasonable. Yeah, it's my mother tongue. So I went back to that, and I never actually really went back to writing in English after that.
Okay, and how long are you now in Serbia after you came back?
I returned since 2021, so 4 years.
Okay.
It's been 4 years.
What I've been wondering about, and what is also something that we have mutual, like you've been going to the workshops of creating writing with Zvonko Karanović, and I know that in the USA and also some other countries, that is kind of like a normal thing. You even have the studies for creative writing, which is not the case here. We were, as with everything, we were kind of late for that, but I see it's developing and pretty fast now in Croatia and Serbia and some other countries here. How was this experience for you when you came back? How did you find out about, can you tell us a bit of how maybe navigated or structured your writing if this happened?
I think I immediately went to creative writing workshops when I came back, because I realized I didn't really have a poetry community. So, and it was, I came back in 2021, so obviously it was still the pandemic. So there was not very many things happening around Belgrade, very many events to go to. So I thought, okay, I'll do a writing workshop online to just kind of get to know some people who are in the scene and, you know, get into it. Because at that point I was already really interested in writing more. And I did my first one with Ognjenka, and then I did, I think, 3 or 4 rounds with Zvonko Karanović. And I loved it. It was so important for me because, firstly, because I met people and I heard their poetry, and I was connected to the like colloquial, let's say, I mean, it is poetry, but like the language of the day, I guess, of the people who live in Belgrade, well, not in Belgrade, actually all around the Balkans, which was super important to me because I was still kind of finding my footing back in Serbian because I hadn't used it in so long on like a daily basis, you know, so I was feeling a bit insecure even though it is my mother tongue. So that was really important, and then hearing obviously feedback from other poets and being inspired by what they were writing and getting different ideas. I'm a huge fan of creative writing workshops for people who are just starting out. I think for people who are not just starting out as well, but like for now in this moment, I don't do them, and I don't feel the need currently. But I think when I'm nearing the completion of my second manuscript, I might return because it gives you kind of a routine, which I think is really nice to have that weekly obligation.
Yeah, it's kind of a discipline, but also what I feel it's important, and what Zvonko is doing very nice is like, okay, you can have, I don't know, talent or tendency to do something, but what if I give you tools? And then with those tools you can develop maybe faster and different directions.
Yeah, I mean, I learned how to be an editor, like the primary editor, and then, that's primary is not the right word, but the first editor, and then I can do a lot of that work by myself and then give it over to my editor, which I think is quite nice for everyone involved in the process of a book, because then it's more efficient, I guess, and everyone knows what editing means, and you're kind of more, I guess, productive in the process.
Yeah, except for learning how to write, it's basically learning how to read.
Yeah,
and that's amazing. I wanted to tackle this especially because also here we have Susanna and Maya right now, and it's something that we all share. Maya was the first person to mention Zvonko Karanović.
Maya was in my group, actually. We were in the same group. Yeah.
So the circle is now full. We were in the castle in Gorski Kotar, and we were in another workshop, and she said, I have to go now because in this break I will go to see Zvonko Karanović for, who is this guy?
Overachieved.
Next time Zvonko came as a teacher to the castle, and it all started. Also, Susanna is here that I was in her group. So I think he did a lot for all of us. And maybe before we go to your first reading, to say a bit more about like a Serbian young scene of poets. You said that you wanted to go into it and meet people, but like kind of a commentary on all this, because for me it's very irregular. I don't think we have it this way, that the generations, like people in their 30s or 20s, to be so close to each other, and maybe to see from your point of view because you're there in it.
Yeah, I think what I found after the pandemic when I returned is just like a really lively poetry scene, and I really have to credit Zvonko Karanović for this in a way, because it was there was a lot of poetry stuff happening, like poetry evenings, readings before Enklava happened. But I think that Enklava and the workshops, the creative writing workshops, really gave like just a platform for a lot, because there are extensive workshops and a lot of people go through them, and it's like he does this anthology every year for the people who you're in it, who are part of the workshop, and it just gives a big platform for the young poets. And I guess the scene kind of took off from there in the last few years, I would say. And I think it was also partially because after the pandemic, people were hungry to just have something happening, right? But yeah, I think Belgrade, specifically, other parts of Serbia as well, I have to say, have a lot of readings, a lot of poetry nights, it's really fun. Like, I think on a weekly basis you have something happening, which is irregular for me as well. But yeah, I think it's a lot of diversity, a lot of different voices. There's also, somebody asked me recently, like, don't you think that creative writing workshops maybe create a trend in the style of writing, and don't you think that that's problematic? And I don't agree with that, because I think that stylistic trends are going to exist regardless. If you're in tune with the scene, if you're following what people are doing, you're probably going to copy or emulate or, fall within a stylistic wave, is what I would call it, rather than a trend. So I don't find that problematic. I think that's typical. I always look at music like as a parallel for myself. And in music, it's like that. Everybody knows that, like there are stylistic waves and things that people do. So I think that we could probably say that there is a wave happening in Serbia right now, of a specific style, a specific voice, but I think that's a good thing. I think whatever's getting people to the page and writing is a fantastic thing, and I have nothing else to say except that.
And I think it maybe also gives to this feeling of collective identity when you're like sharing something together. And if you read all those books that Zvonko published of all young writers, you see that they're still very different.
Yes, of course.
So I agree with you that it's not a problem at all. Maybe we can go to your first reading. You can do in Serbian and in English, so everybody can get a bit.
Of course, I will. Okay, so I will read. I think all the poems I will read first the Serbian version and then the English translation. So the first poem. Ne poslati email iz Njujorka. Odbijaš da koristiš tehnologiju. Ne mogu da te pozovem i tražim da imenuješ drvo koje raste pored crkve. Proleće postoji i van tvog dvorišta. Prigušeni zvuk vozova podsjeća me na brujanje motora komšijine lade nive. Moji novi prijatelji znaju koliko voliš jabuke, prepoznaju naše sličnosti iako te nikada nisu sreli. Ne bi ti se ni svidelo ovde. Ovaj grad je neskroman, ima previše betona. Sigurno bi imao šta da kažeš o prevelikim porcijama i nepotrebnom bacanju hrane. Deda, ja jedina, dižem pogled prema krošnjama. Thank you. And now the English version. Unsent email from New York. You refuse to use technology. I can't call you and ask you to name the tree that's growing by the church. Spring exists outside your yard. The muffled sound of trains reminds me of your neighbor's engine humming in the distance. My new friends know how much you love apples. They recognize our similarities, even though you've never met. You wouldn't like it here. The city is arrogant. There's too much concrete. I think you'd have things to say about the excessive portions, unnecessary food waste. Grandpa, I'm the only one looking up at the treetops.
Beautiful. This was the poem that bought me. That's why I actually invited Višnja. So in my papers, this is also marked. Really loved it because it made me think about something that you also discussed a bit in the break. The fact when you're leaving to some country so far away, to a different continent, different land, you think about a lot of stuff in your box, when you wake up just in another place, sometimes lost, sometimes found. But this feeling of our ancestors and parents and grandparents, and thinking how much of all this they never saw or went through or lived, it really is something. I think it's a big topic that we could discuss, and it's not the only poem that you tackle this thing. So can you maybe comment on this, like how did it make you feel being there, or your transfer of your experience, those people who never went through it?
I think when I was writing this, it was important for me to kind of put the light on this part of it, the experience of living far away. I think America is just situational in this book because that was my experience, but I hoped that this would be universal in the sense that somebody who moved anywhere, like from their hometown to a different town, it doesn't matter where, would probably understand this kind of feeling of removing yourself from what your like natural maternal context is. And I really wanted to kind of shine a light on all the negative or maybe challenging, difficult emotions that go along with that experience, because when you are living it, you maybe don't necessarily have time to sit around and mope around and be sad and nostalgic and think about how you're missing your parents and you're guilty that you left them and all of this stuff. And but that's a really real part of that experience. So when I returned, I really needed to write this book for myself, to kind of tackle all of that and process it. So a lot of the poems have to do with that feeling of nostalgia, of loneliness, of guilt, because I kind of felt, what is the part that I didn't know about before I moved away, and that I maybe wish that I knew a little bit more about before, you know. I hoped that it would kind of bring that reality also, you know, to the forefront.
I think all these things that you mentioned, the feelings you were dealing with, and the whole atmosphere of you being away from everyone, that you picked a very good title for the book, because you added another layer to it. Okay, we know that jet lag is mostly dealing with your body and physical experience, like being in unease or tired or confused, but you added up like this emotional, psychological jet lag, which I really loved. And I think people who are traveling, if we are just judging by the Instagram photos, I don't know, the profiles, everything is perfect. Each time the waterfall was just right, you know, without anyone there. And it's not really like that. And you are kind of shedding a light on those things that are not to be spoken about most of the time. And when I moved to US, I had very similar thoughts as you, and we even went to like same places. Yeah. And you kind of like showed me what it is to put those right words and right feelings into a book. I would suggest a little bit more of your reading, so people can get the idea. And I will also have some suggestions, because I always do that.
Why don't you do that first? Give me a suggestion. I don't have this one translated into English, unfortunately, but that's okay. Roditelji. Juče na Skype-u pokazujete mi novi šporet. O svakodnevici govorim samo kada lažem. Svoju usamljenost krijem u detaljnim opisima grada, uglavnom postavljam pitanja koja traže opširne odgovore i propuštam čitave rečenice mapirajući vaša lica. Okay, I'll read one in English. This one is called Cows Running Through the Salinas River. At the warehouse, a stack of crates sits under the hot dust. The American flag seduces passers-by from the mast. I know that workers don't look up in admiration while wiping sweat away with their forearms. The flag is there for people like me who are trying to put a frame on something, even this desolation. The cows are running, careless. They stop at the first watering hole.
Thank you. I want to do all clap and find and search. And,
Okay. This one I have a translation for. Okay. We'll do this one in Serbian and English. Gospođa Linda želi nešto da mi kaže. Tvrdi kako je u Tenesiju ključno ići u dobru crkvu. Ona je u svojoj upoznala muža, posvetila život održavanju parohijskih biljaka. Njena ćerka je poslušna. Svake nedelje spušta čelo na krhke sklopljene dlanove. Ne kao njena sestra Mary, koja je 70-ih otišla u Kaliforniju u potrazi za pravim Bogom, pronašla nekog slikara i prestala da se javlja porodici. Moralo je loše da se završi. Mary je previše lutala. Miss Linda wants to tell me something. She says that in Tennessee, finding a good church is everything. That's how she met her husband, dedicated her life then to maintaining the parish plans. Her daughter is a good girl. Every Sunday, she lets her forehead fall on fragile folded palms. Unlike her sister Mary, who went to California in the 70s in search of a real God, found a painter and stopped picking up. It had to end badly. Mary was a wanderer.
I really love this poem because it's kind of like an ode, how to say it, like an ode to all those wandering little girls, not being good girls, going too far away. And I love, I wanted for you to read this one also because I feel that when the maybe like a general emotion of the book is unease or nostalgia or something that could go into negative feelings. It's amazing when you manage to put some humor into it as well, and this one managed it, and I think it gave a nice little break from this feeling. I also wanted to ask you, just I will not be super long because I know we have very tight schedule, but just the fact that you were for 7 years in the US. I know you worked in different places, you were studying, singing, doing different things. It's a big period of your life. What would you maybe have like as a favorite spot or place or the event, something that, because I'm asking you this because at the beginning of the book you are saying there is a quotation. You say like there is the USA that we all believe that there is, and something that you cannot see. And I feel that all this that is in the media, in the internet, in the pop culture, it's just a glance, and then what is the real one?
I think it would be difficult for me to choose a place, although I have like maybe 10 in my mind now. I think I love the nature of the US. I think it's fascinating and so vast, and so much of it is untouched, and I think that's a beautiful thing that they really take care of. But I think maybe my favorite thing, I would choose a thing that I learned, maybe rather than a place, which is I think this kind of sense of optimism that I learned there, and it's of course very problematic in a lot of ways, and we could talk about that, but that's a very long conversation. But I think I decided to keep that American optimism on a very shallow level and take it with me, and that's how I chose to take it, because I think that's something that we lack in the Balkans a lot of the times, and that's totally understandable, but it really benefited me to feel like, oh, actually something like this idea that I have, I can make it happen. Like, and I mean, obviously, like what you're doing in Đakovo is like a very good example of being an optimist and like actually working and achieving things. And of course it exists here as well, but I personally just didn't feel it before I moved there. And then that was a huge thing for me to kind of bring back here, this idea of like, from the most mundane things of like, I can go and have a conversation in the bank and get them to do what I want them to do for me, to like, just the biggest, most, I don't know, like enthusiastic ideas I could have. So that's maybe what I would pick.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because also maybe I wouldn't do all of these things if I wasn't in the US and in Moscow and stuff. So yeah, it's like, oh, if I can make this happen, then probably there are some other stuff that I could make happen. Yeah, I love that. So my suggestion for the kind of going to the end of our conversation would be first reading a poem about Yosemite, because I think that the surrounding we are in, and the sound of the trees and the birds and this natural surrounding really calls for this one. And for the end, the very last poem of your book, because I think it's very, very valuable to have this kind of friends.
Let's do it. I am very excited to read the Yosemite poem in this beautiful forest as well. Let me just find it. Here we go. Yosemite. Bila sam tako sićušna u podnožju granitnih litica. Nisam imala s kim da podelim dlan na kori sekvoje. Jedan Japanac mi je pričao o osjećaju odgovornosti prema precima. Kada pere kosu, dugo masira teme, u nadi da to i njima prija. Nisam toliko plemenita, tražim zarasle staze, nevidljive saputnike, ako ih uopšte ima, stalno zavlačim u šiblje. Tog četvrtka rizik od šumskog požara gurao me ka vodi. Mislila sam o sekvojama, starijim od mog porodičnog stabla, koliko ljudi stane u guste crvene godove. I kad sam stopala konačno spustila u ledeni izvor, učinilo mi se da čujem stotine uzdaha oko sebe. I have actually translations for both, so that's fantastic. Yosemite. I was so tiny beneath the granite cliffs. When I put my palm to the redwood tree, there was no one there to share it with. A Japanese man once told me about his sense of responsibility towards his ancestors. Sometimes in the shower, he would massage his scalp a little longer in case they liked the feeling too. I'm not that noble. Always looking for overgrown trails, dragging them through the bushes, my invisible companions, if there are any. That Thursday, the risk of wildfire pushed me towards the water. I was thinking about the redwoods, older than my family tree, how many people could fit in their thick red rings. And when my feet finally touched the ice-cold shallow, I thought I heard hundreds of sighs around me. And the very last poem of my book, Oda drugaricama. Najveći deo onoga što znam o ljubavi naučila sam iz naših rastanaka, zagrljaja koji su uvek govorili idi. Ode to girlfriends. Most of what I know about love I learned from our goodbyes, the hugs that always said, go.
Thank you, Višnja. It
Thank
was
you.
very nice to hear it in both languages. We will not take much more of your time. Maybe you want to add something for the end?
I will say that I have 6 books that I am giving away. They are in Serbian and they are on that little table right there. So if you want them, you can take them. They are yours. And thank you for having me in this truly wonderful setting. I don't think I've ever been in a beautiful reading like this in my life. So thank you so much.
I am very glad and thank you all for your attention. I'm very eager to hear our next speakers. So enjoy the forest. I hope there are not too many mosquitoes. And I can maybe call immediately the others to prepare, and in 5 minutes we proceed with the program. Thank you.
Thank you.